Well, hello, Hearth and Homies. Tonight's compilation is The New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. This show ran from 1939 to 1947. Started off on NBC's Blue Network and would eventually continue on to the Mutual Broadcasting System. It began with both Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce starring as the characters they made famous in the films. Now, the show was sponsored by Petri Wines. Every show would begin with a visit to Dr. Watson's home. He's now retired and living in California, and he would retell a tale of some adventure between him and Sherlock Holmes. Now, we've taken this classic old-time radio show and added a visual component to it, the OTR Visual Radio, to give you a unique old-time radio viewing experience. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, and as always, thanks for tuning in.
Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in The New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson as he tells you another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And as for me, well, I'm going to tell you about a swell idea. The idea of serving Petri California sherry before dinner. Tomorrow night, just before dinner, instead of that last-minute rush, take it easy. Pour yourself a glass of Petri sherry. Now, if you'll do that just once, I wouldn't have to say another word about Petri sherry. You'd be a customer for life. Because Petri sherry is good wine with a capital good. Judge that Petri sherry any way you like. By its beautiful amber color, its heart of the grape aroma, or by the best test of all, its flavor. Petri sherry is delicious. And you have a choice of two kinds, Petri regular and Petri pale dry sherry. If you're not sure which you'll like better, try them both. Don't buy one, buy two. But remember, always buy Petri. And now I'm sure our good friend Dr. Watson's expecting us. Let's go in and join him. Good evening, Dr. Watson.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell.
All set for tonight's story?
Yes, my boy, I'm all set. It began in Vienna in 1889. The old Vienna of bright lights, lovely ladies, and lilting music.
What were you and the great Sherlock Holmes doing there, Doctor?
Mr. Bartell, what were we doing there?
Yes, sir. Were you just taking a trip?
Oh, in those early days of our association, we didn't have either the time or the money for trips. No, we were in Vienna at the express command of the Emperor Franz Joseph. It was in October, I remember, that we arrived in the city, and for several days we were forced to cool our heels awaiting the imperial pleasure. On one of those idle evenings, that the good services of our friend, the Chief of Police, Count Frano, secured us an invitation to a resplendent ball that was being held at the palace of Princess Stephanie von Kram. It was an incredibly colorful spectacle, Mr. Bartell. A string orchestra high in the gallery of the palace ballroom played a haunting Strauss waltz, while on the floor below, the cream of Viennese aristocracy swayed and glided gaily to the lilting music. I can remember the picture so well, Mr. Bartell, that Holmes and I stood there talking to the Chief of Police, Count Frano.
A colorful scene, is it not, gentlemen?
By George, yes, Count Frano. It must be a real holiday for you and Mr. Holmes.
What makes you say that, Watson?
Well, it's hard to think of the criminal world when one looks at such a gathering.
And yet Count Frano knows as well as I do that the criminal is not confined to class or environment.
Indeed, no, Mr. Holmes. I can assure you that every guest here tonight has been scrutinized as he entered.
Yes, I imagine that many plainclothes men are present in this room now, aren't they, Count Frano?
Oh, yes. We take no chances.
I suppose you can't afford to. There's enough jewelry being worn here tonight for a king's ransom, I should say.
The waltz is finished. Now I can present you to our hostess, Princess von Kram. Stephanie, my pigeon.
My pigeon must know the princess pretty well.
Yes, I'm glad to see that in Vienna The profession of criminal detection carries no social stigma.
Allow me to present you Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, the Princess Stephanie von Kram.
I'm very honored to meet you, Your Highness.
I'm most happy to meet you, gentlemen. Permit me to introduce my protege, Janos Horváth, the Hungarian composer.
This ball tonight, Mr. Holmes, will mark a rare occasion. A signal honor is to be conferred on Herr Horváth and myself before tonight is through. The next waltz is a new composition of his. Tonight will be its debut.
Indeed, how very interesting.
It is a great honor the princess has conferred on me. A new composition could not possibly be presented under more auspicious circumstances.
Count Frana, you spoke of an honor in connection with yourself.
May I tell them our secret, Stephanie?
No, I will tell them myself, Anatole. After your waltz has been played, Janos, and Anatole and I shall be the first to have the privilege of dancing to it, my father is to make a public announcement. He is to announce my engagement to Count Anatole Refon.
Oh, indeed, my congratulations to you both. Very lucky fellow. Very lucky
Am I
fellow.
not the luckiest of men? Is she not exquisite? I, the gay man of Vienna, the cavalier who swore that no one woman would ever capture him. I confess it, gentlemen, I'm in love. Oh, but I pity you. Even the great waltzes of old Vienna could hardly be worthy of this moment.
Oh, Anatole, you are a born flatterer. Oh, come, the waltz is about to begin. I shall see you gentlemen later.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Well,
The orchestra is tuning up, Herr Horváth. I imagine this is a great moment for you.
A very frightening one, I assure you, my friend. In a few minutes, I shall know whether my new work is to be crowned with success or failure.
Dr. Frana is leading the princess to the center of the floor. The conductor is raising his baton.
This is your moment, Herr Horváth. Good luck.
Pray for me, gentlemen. Pray for me.
There they go, the princess and Count Frana. They're starting the waltz.
Ah, they make a striking pair, don't they?
Here come the other couples out on the floor. Charming. Quite charming. It reminds me of... Great Scott, that was a revolver shot.
It's the princess. She's been shot. Come on, Watson. Out of the way, please. Out of the way. Count Profano. What happened?
Stephanie, Dr. Watson, see what you can do for her.
Count Frana, there's nothing I can do, I'm afraid. She was shot through the brain. She died instantly.
Stephanie is dead. Stop that devilish music. Lock all the doors. There's a murderer to be found.
Count Profano, have you found any clues?
One of my men found a revolver. It had been thrust into the earth of a potted palm.
May I see it, please?
Of course, here.
Rammed into the soft earth. Confound it. Count Profano, your fiancée was an extremely beautiful woman. You must have had rivals.
Yes, several, but none of them are present tonight.
Who will inherit her estate?
A 6-month-old nephew.
Who's his guardian?
The Emperor Franz Joseph himself. No, Mr. Holmes. I know of no obvious motive for someone wishing poor Stephanie dead.
Well, perhaps it was a political crime. She was a wealthy aristocrat and a very prominent one.
Yes, it's very possible. Many nihilist assassins have been active in my country recently.
Meanwhile, we have a ballroom full of suspects waiting for us.
So I was just going to suggest we went back there. We can't find out very much by staying here in the library.
It's a delicate matter. Almost everyone present tonight is known to me personally.
May I suggest that you go back to the ballroom and have the male guests file past you? Detain for questioning anyone whose evening clothes do not fit perfectly.
Clothes don't fit? What's the cut of a man's clothes got to do with this?
Anyone invited to such a ball as this would naturally have his own tailor. I think, Count Profano, if you found a man who had to hire his costume, he might be an impostor and may well prove to be your assassin.
Well, Mr. Holmes, your plan has not been effective so far. We find one Englishman who is unusually badly dressed, and what do we discover? He's an English milord whose luggage was lost on the train.
Yes, and the second suspect proved to be a perfectly respectable Viennese doctor whose nasty little child had taken a last-minute snip at his tailcoat with a pair of scissors.
And the third was poor Horváth, the composer, who cannot yet afford a good dress suit, eh? Well, Count Profano, why not have the next suspect shown in?
Yes, of course. Schober!
Bring in the next man.
Ja, Herr Braun. Kommen Sie herein, bitte.
Ein, bitte. What a frightful looking fellow.
Your name, please.
My name is Gruning. What do you wish with me?
Gruning? Your name was not on the list of invitations.
One moment, please. Let me see your right hand, Herr Gruning.
You have no right to touch me.
Where did you get these fresh earth stains? Your right thumb is pitted and the nail is full of dirt.
What does that poor policeman...
Not a short while ago, you tried to hide your revolver by ramming it into an earth-filled flower pot. Give me that revolver, please, Count Profano. It will be easy to compare the samples of earth.
It would not be necessary.
Well, you admit that you murdered the princess tonight, then?
Certainly, I admit it.
Why did you kill her?
She was an aristocrat. She was an oppressor of the poor. I'm glad I killed her. One day, I and my party will kill all of you filthy aristocrats.
Count Profano, put down that revolver.
Shoot him like the dark he is.
No, Count Profano. Even you can't take the law into your own hands.
Why do you not shoot me? I'm not afraid to die.
Have him taken away, Schober.
Nehmt den Hund ins Gefängnis.
Thank you for stopping my hand just now, Doctor. But when he spoke of Stephanie that way, I could have killed him just as he killed her.
Very understandable impulse, sir, but one that would have ruined your life.
My life? Now that she is dead, my life is empty. What right do love and beauty have to exist in a world that no longer holds Stephanie? She was all light and life, loveliness. And now... But I am hardly displaying my Viennese blood, am I? The murder is caught, thanks to you, Mr. Holmes, and my life, such as it is, must go on. Somehow.
That's how the story began, Mr. Bartell.
Began? It sounds like the end of a story to me, Doctor.
Far from it, my boy. The next day, Holmes and I had our interview with His Imperial Majesty and learned the nature of the services expected of us. Services that required our leaving the city. And that's why, my boy, we were gone from Vienna for some weeks. We didn't know that during our absence, Herr Holbert's waltz, which had had such a tragic debut, was beginning to make a sort of morbid history.
Herr Baron, the Horvath Waltz. We have had many requests for it. Gladly, we will play it, Herr Baron.
Isn't that the Horvath Waltz they are playing?
Yes, my dear, and see who is walking onto the floor to dance to it. Leah Mollenstein, the actress. A beautiful creature.
Are you trying to make me jealous, Hans?
Gott in Himmel, it's Leah Mollenstein! She's been shot!
A new ballet, and to the music of the Horvath Waltz.
Magnificent. Never has Krasnova danced better.
Have you ever seen such exquisite pirouettes?
Six deaths in 4 weeks, Schober. All beautiful women and all killed to the music of the Horvath Waltz. There's a homicidal madman at watch in Vienna. There's only one thing to be done. We must forbid absolutely the playing of that waltz by imperial decree.
Yeah, all of this, Mr. Bartell, until we return to Vienna.
And then, I suppose, Sherlock Holmes was drawn into the case again, Doctor.
Yes, my boy. Holmes immediately made a close study of the newspaper reports on the tragedies. It was with great difficulty that I tore him away from his investigations to attend the reception at which the Emperor was to thank us for our services on the mission that we just completed. As we arrived at the Imperial Palace, almost the first person we ran into was the Hungarian composer, Janos.
Dr. Watson, you have heard of the tragedies connected with my waltz?
Yes, we have indeed. So we have
I was
indeed.
making a close study of the newspaper reports on them just before I came here.
You must do something, Mr. Holmes. People will hardly listen to other music. They want my waltz. But that is forbidden. I'm losing a reputation and a fortune while that waltz remains unplayed.
Or perhaps, Herr Horvath, you are laying an excellent foundation for a later reputation and fortune.
What do you mean?
All this publicity, however distasteful to you at the moment, must in the long run prove invaluable. Ah, there you are, my dear Count Rufano.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I'm glad to see you back in Vienna. You've heard of the murders?
Yes, Count, we were just discussing them.
I need your help again, my good friend. For over a month now, the murder has been at large, and I cannot seem to get on the trail.
Well, I'm Gruning, the first killer. What have you done with him?
Released him.
What? Released him? Great Scott, why?
At the hearing, it was obvious the man was an egomaniac. He boasted of the murder of Stephanie, apparently out of pure vanity. The liberal newspaper editors made quite an issue of the case. They brought pressure to bear, and we had to let him go.
Confound it. I wish I hadn't left Vienna.
Well, if the fellow's at large again, Count Rufano, it's pretty obvious that he's the murderer of the other women, too.
On the contrary, Doctor, he was in prison until yesterday. The last of the murders was committed 3 days ago. Oh, here comes His Imperial Highness Franz Joseph.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Your Highness, good evening.
Your Highness.
Well, I see we have very distinguished company tonight. Not only the masterful Sherlock Holmes and his colleague, Dr. Watson, our English friends that we are honoring, but I see that we have a distinguished representative from our Hungarian Empire, Janos Horvath. It was a success, I'm told, as a breed of composers for whom Vienna is famous.
Your Imperial Highness is most kind.
There's a pipe organ in here. It's in excellent condition, I am told. Will you not play as one of your compositions, Herr Horvath?
I shall be most honored, Your Highness.
Sit down, gentlemen, sit down.
Thank you.
What shall I play, Your Imperial Highness?
Anything you wish, young man. Anything you wish.
Thank you, Your Highness. With your permission, I choose to play...
Great heavens! He's playing the death waltz.
On your guard, Watson. Even in the Imperial Palace itself, this twirling tune may invoke murder.
You'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second, which just gives me time to remind you that if any one wine could be called the perfect wine for almost any occasion, that one wine would be Petri California Sherry. Petri Sherry is not only a fine before-dinner wine, but it's wonderful after dinner, too. And, of course, when you're entertaining or when guests drop in, whether in the afternoon or evening, there's nothing better than a glass of Petri Sherry. And it's comforting to know that you can serve Petri Sherry proudly, because the name Petri is the proudest name in the history of American wines. Dr. Watson, you certainly left me hanging on a cliff that time. You broke off your story just as the Hungarian composer started to play his ill-fated waltz to the Emperor Franz Joseph. What happened?
At the time, my boy, fortunately, nothing happened. Herr Horvath completed his composition without apparent incident, and shortly afterwards we attended a banquet that was given in our honor, a banquet that concluded with a rather curious ceremony in which the Emperor presented Sherlock Holmes with a medal to commemorate his services. What everything was. Never mind about that. Finally, it was shortly after 10 o'clock, I remember. Holmes and I, together with Count Rufano, left the royal chambers and started to descend the spiral staircase leading to the main hall.
You were greatly honored tonight, Mr. Holmes. I've only known His Imperial Highness to make 3 such presentations before, and they were all to my own countrymen.
He might have made another while he was about it.
Please, Watson, please. The Emperor was most kind. I can't help feeling that he over-evaluated my services.
You're being unusually modest, Holmes.
Perhaps because I feel that my visit here is incomplete until I've solved the death waltz murders.
I hope you'll be able to stay in Vienna long enough to do that. I confess I am at my wit's end.
I've been giving the matter a great deal of thought, Count Rufano. I have a plan for trapping the killer. It's in rather an embryonic stage at the moment, but over a few pipes at the hotel tonight, I expect to develop it thoroughly. I shall call at your office in the morning and explain it to you.
I shall be awaiting your visit eagerly. One more of these murders in the newspaper outcry might become so loud that I should have to resign my post as chief of police.
Well, when Horvath made that daring gesture and played the death waltz tonight, it proved one thing. It's not infallible. the death of a beautiful woman doesn't always follow the playing of the melody.
Very true, Doctor, but...
Watson.
Yes, sir?
Strike a match, will you?
Huh?
There's a figure here slumped on the landing.
Great Scott, it. Body of a girl.
A very beautiful girl, too.
Shot through the forehead. You were wrong, Watson. The death waltz is infallible, but I swear to you that the killer has struck for the last time. Ah, there you are, my dear Count Profano.
Yes, I followed the instructions you gave me this morning, Mr. Holmes. Chainbaum's is at the moment the smartest restaurant in Vienna. I've reserved the best table for you, and I've invited the guests that you named.
A strangely assorted couple, I must say. Janos Horvath, composer, and that grinning fellow, the one that admitted shooting your fiancée, Count Profano.
It's as much as I could do to keep my hands off him when he arrived here, Doctor. But Mr. Holmes insisted that I ask you. Just the same, I wish you would tell me his plan. I'm completely in the dark.
Completely in the dark. I can sympathize with you, Count Profano. Holmes never tells me a thing either.
Miss John, I guess, shall we? In a very few minutes, I'm sure that my plan will be perfectly apparent. Good evening, Herr Horvath.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson.
How do you do, Herr Holmes?
And how are you tonight, Herr Gröning?
Angry at having to come here against my will. My party does not approve of these aristocratic padded pigsties. But Count Refrano informed me that if I did not come here tonight, I could expect to find myself back in prison. How could I resist such a persuasive invitation?
Ah, here comes the third guest for our table. I met her at the hotel a few hours ago. Miss Banks, I'm so glad that you were able to come.
Hello, Mr. Holmes. I didn't know this was going to be a party, but I couldn't be happier.
Allow me to present you, Count Profano, Dr. Watson, Herr Horvath, Herr Gröning, Miss Barbara Banks from the United States of America.
How do you do, Holmes? I wish I knew what you're up to.
And how can a young American girl afford to come to Vienna, may I ask?
Of course you can ask. My father made a lot of money, and he wanted me to have the advantages he never had.
Your father made money because he ground the faces of the poor.
Oh, my father never ground a poor face in his life.
He was a capitalist. I spit on him.
Oh, that's rather unfriendly. And also, geographically speaking, something of a problem. You see, he's living in Wyoming.
You make fun of me.
Only because you made fun of me. Mr. Holmes, I did as you asked me.
I'm very grateful, Miss Banks.
The orchestra leader didn't want to play it. He seemed scared. But I waved a lot of money in front of him, and I promised to pay the fine as well.
Splendid.
Great Scott, I see it all now.
So do I. You persuaded Miss Banks to bribe the orchestra leader to play.
My waltz. My forbidden waltz?
Yes, Herr Horvath. I felt that if the request came from a young American, it might seem quite reasonable.
Particularly if the requests were accompanied by American dollars ground out of the faces of the poor.
You are being unpleasant to me, aren't you?
They're playing at your waltz, Herr Horvath. The death waltz.
Mr. Holmes, this is against the law. The Horvath waltz is forbidden by imperial decree.
True, nonetheless, my dear Count, I implore you not to arrest the orchestra leader until after the waltz is completed.
In which case, since I requested it and it's still playing, I'd like a partner. Will you dance with me, Count Refrano?
I'm sorry, Miss Banks, but with this melody, I shall never dance again.
Oh. Well, how about you, Dr. Watson?
Oh, I like you very much, my dear, but I'm afraid I'm not as light on my feet as I used to be. In any case, I was never much of a hand at the waltz. The polka's more in my line.
Dear me, I'm getting an inferiority complex.
Oh, please do not, Miss Banks. You'll observe that the general public seems singularly unwilling to dance, too. Not one couple has ventured onto the floor.
How can you blame them? The waltz with Horvath may mean death. How can you blame them?
I'm not afraid. After all, Herr Horvath, it's your own music. I'll dance with you.
You're most kind, Miss Banks, and courageous. But to be a partner of the only woman on the floor would mean ruin, an admission of failure.
My third refusal. I'm a wallflower.
No, my dear Miss Banks, the aristocrats, they're afraid. But I, plain, simple Gröning, I will dance with you, Miss Millions.
Oh, bless you, Herr Gröning. And I assure you my father does not grind the faces of the poor.
He does grind the faces of the poor, this I know.
Stop her, it's suicide.
I think not, Herr Horvath.
I think so. And I'll not stay here to watch it.
Where the devil's he off to?
Do not worry, Doctor. I shall keep an eye on him.
Yes, and we'll keep an eye on both of them. Come on, Watson.
Holmes is leaving the room.
Whereas Count Rofrano has deserted his trail and has slipped behind one of those pillars.
Good Lord, he's drawing a revolver.
Exactly, Watson. He's our man. Put down that revolver, Count Rofrano. Put it down, I say.
He's turning it on himself. Count Rofrano! I still can't believe it, Holmes. Not the fact that Count Rofrano blew his brains out, but the fact that he was a murderer.
Yes, I was slow to believe it too, old chap, and I blame myself in consequence. Two things should have been instantly apparent about the madman who killed beautiful women when he heard the Horvath waltz. Firstly, he must have had some motivation which drove him to such an act.
Secondly, he must have carried a revolver with him at all times, since he was invariably armed when the occasion presented itself.
Exactly, and that factor made me think of the police official. Then, of course, I saw Rofrano's motivation. He loved the Princess Stephanie dearly. Her death in his arms was a psychological shock that was more than his mentality could stand.
When he heard that music, it reminded him of the dead princess and forced him to kill.
That's right, old fellow. You will recall that what he said to us after his fiancée's death. What right do love and beauty have to exist in a world that no longer holds Stephanie? When he heard the music, he couldn't bear to think that other loveliness existed, and so, well, he destroyed it.
But who killed the Princess Stephanie?
The man who was first arrested for it, Herr Gröning. He admitted it after a little persuasion when the police arrived. Taken back to prison in the carriage that just took Count Rofrano's body.
It's shocking to think that 7 innocent women have been murdered before this case is solved.
Yes, a fact that will be a constant reproach to me, I assure you.
Oh, I didn't mean that, my dear fellow. We weren't even in Vienna when 5 of the killings took place.
Hello. Here comes Miss Banks.
Mr. Holmes, what happened to that funny little man who danced with me?
Herr Gröning? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He went to prison, Miss Banks. He was a murderer.
Well, I must say this is a strange kind of a party you asked me to, Mr. Holmes. One of the guests blows his brains out, and the other, the only man who danced with me, turns out to be a murderer. Oh, I see now why Father sent me to Europe. An evening like this could never happen in Wyoming.
Look. Helvet's walking out in front of the orchestra.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Shh. Listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I, Arnold Horvath, wish to assure you, upon the word of the great English detective Sherlock Holmes, that never again shall my new waltz be an accompaniment for murder. Henceforth, its melody will be for life and love and laughter. I have ordered a bottle of the finest Tokay sent to each of your tables. Raise your glasses and pledge me as I now conduct my waltz. Free at last from the kiss of death.
Say, Doctor, I really like that story. That was a baffler.
Yes, wasn't it? A highly placed police official is the last person in the world you'd think guilty of murder. I must confess I wasn't of so much help to Holmes in solving that case.
Oh, don't let that worry you, Doctor. After all, Holmes almost missed solving it himself.
Oh, thank you, my boy. Nice of you, thank you. But it certainly was one of the most interesting cases that I was ever connected with.
I know what you mean. You know, I came across quite an interesting case myself the other day.
Oh, you don't say where?
Right in my own house.
Oh, that's interesting. What kind of case?
Sherry.
Oh, good gracious.
That's right, a case of Petri, California sherry. You see, I buy it by the case, Doctor, because that Petri wine is really extraordinary. But all Petri wine is unusual wine, unusually good, because the Petri family has been making wine for generations. Because this is so, and because the Petri business has been owned and operated by the Petri family ever since its beginning, and is today the largest independent family-owned wine company in America, naturally the name Petri on a bottle of wine is more than a trademark. It's the personal assurance of the Petri family that every drop of wine in that bottle is good wine. Naturally good wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Adventure of the Illustrious Client. Music is by Dean Fostler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. This is the world's largest network, the Mutual Broadcasting System. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invites you to listen to Dr. Watson tell another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. Before he starts, I can tell you something it's really worth knowing. Simply this. The best beginning a good meal ever had is a glass of Petri California Sherry. Petri Sherry is the perfect before-dinner wine. While you're waiting for dinner to be put on the table, pour yourself a glass of that clear, amber-colored Petri Sherry. Now, just sit back and sip it slowly. Take your time so you can thoroughly enjoy every single drop of that wonderful Petri flavor. And what a flavor that sherry has. It comes right from the sun-ripened heart of wonderful California grapes. You may be a real wine expert and know all about sherry wine, but believe me, until you've tried a Petri sherry, you're really missing something. Serve Petri sherry alone or serve it with canapes or appetizers. And by all means, serve it proudly. You can because the letters P-E-T-R-I spell the proudest name in the history of American wines. Petri. And now let's visit our good friend and host, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell. Draw up your usual chair and make yourself at home. How about a glass of sherry?
That'd be very nice. All ready for tonight's story, Doctor?
Yes, my boy. Here's your sherry.
Thank you, sir.
My story begins on a June night in 1889. My wife and I had spent a quiet evening at home, I remember. It was just about the hour that a man gives his first yawn and glances at the clock, when the tranquility of the scene was broken by the discordant jangling of our front doorbell.
An emergency call for you, I suppose, Doctor.
Not exactly, Mr. Bartell. It turned out to be a certain Mrs. Isa Whitney, an old friend of my wife's who'd come to us in trouble. Her husband, she told us, had been missing for 48 hours, and, knowing him to be the victim of the shocking habit of taking opium, she was convinced that he was lying drugged and stupefied in some foul den amid the London waterfronts.
And I suppose you went out to try to find him?
Yes, Mr. Bartell, I did. She told me that her husband had mentioned frequenting a place called the Bar of Gold in Upper Swandam Lane, so naturally that's where I began my search. I quickly located it, and after ordering my cab to wait, I entered the place. A strange sight met my eyes. Through the smoke-ridden gloom, I could catch a glimpse of bodies lying in strange, fantastic poses as they smoked the pipes of death. Most of the unhappy creatures lay silently, but some muttered to themselves and others talked together in strange, low, monotonous voices, their conversation coming in gushes and then trailing off into silence, each mumbling his own thoughts and paying little attention or heed to the words of his neighbor. As I entered, an attendant hurried up to me with an opium pipe and a supply of the drug and beckoned me to an empty berth.
Master may lie here.
I haven't come to stay here, my good man. I'm looking for a friend, Mr. Isa Whitney.
No one by that name here, Master.
Well, I'm going to search this place just the same.
Please not to make trouble, Master.
Watson. Is that you, Watson?
Whitney, thank heavens I've found you, man.
What time is it?
It's nearly 11.
Of what day?
What day? Friday, June the 19th.
Good Lord, I thought it was Wednesday.
It is Wednesday. You're trying to confuse me.
I tell you, it's Friday. Your wife has been waiting 2 days for you.
You're mixed up in your dates, Watson. I've only been here a few hours. 3 pipes, 4 pipes. I forget how many. I'll go home with you.
Here, I'll give you a hand. That's it. I have a cab waiting.
I must owe some money. Will you settle up for me, Watson?
Yes, of course. Here, wait here for me. Stop pulling at my sleeve, my good fellow. Who are you and what do you want?
A word in your ear, please, sir.
Oh, very well. What is it?
Get rid of your friend and join me outside.
Holmes, what on earth are you doing here in this den?
Your cab waiting?
Yes?
Then please use it to send your befuddled friend home in. And if you feel up to it, I should also recommend that you send a note to the cabman telling your wife that you have thrown in your lot with me. I'd be exceedingly glad to have a little talk with you.
Yes, of course, Holmes.
Splendid. Then conclude your business here, old chap. I'll meet you outside in about 10 minutes.
Where on earth is he? It's nearly... Is that you, Holmes?
Yes, Watson, it's me.
Your disguise is wonderful. I'd never recognized you if you hadn't spoke to me just now.
Disposed of your friend?
Yes, of course.
Splendid. Let's start walking. I have a horse and trap waiting for me in the next street.
Oh, what on earth were you doing in the Bar of Gold, Holmes?
Trying to get news of a missing man. You, Simon, I'm in the midst of a very remarkable inquiry, and I'd hoped to get a clue from the incoherent ramblings of those poor devils back there. There's the horse and trap under the street lamp on the corner. You'll come with me, Watson.
Yes, of course, if I can be of any use.
A trusty comrade is always of use. My room at the Cedars has 2 beds in it.
The Cedars?
Yes, that's Mr. Neville St. Clair's house and our present destination. It's near Lee in Kent, about 7 miles from here. I'm using it as a headquarters while I conduct my inquiries.
Evening, Mr. Holmes. Everything all right?
Yes, thank you, John. Get in, Watson.
Right, John.
I shan't need you any more tonight, John. Here's £1/2 for you. Look out for me tomorrow about 11.
Right you are, Mr. Holmes. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, John. Go on, get up.
Well, Holmes, if we have a 7-mile drive ahead of us, perhaps you'll tell me about the case that you're working on.
With pleasure, old chap. But first, take the reins for a few minutes, will you? I want to remove my makeup and take off my wig and be comfortable. After that, I'll tell you why we are headed for the Kentish countryside at this hour of the night. Watson, you have a grand gift of silence. It makes you invaluable as a companion. We've driven 4 miles and you haven't uttered a word.
It wasn't easy, Holmes. I've been dying to question you, but I could see that you were preoccupied.
Then I shall reward you with a clear and concise statement of my problem. Mr. Neville St. Clair, aged 37, the father of 2 children and an affectionate husband, is missing. He left his house at the Cedars near Lee, our present destination, last Monday.
4 days ago, eh?
Yes. Now, why should an affectionate husband and a happy father disappear?
Any money trouble?
Oh, I think not. His entire debts at the moment amount to £88, while he has £220 standing to his credit at the Capital and Counties Bank.
Who was the last person to see him on Monday?
His wife. But let me tell you the story. He left his house for London rather earlier than usual.
He was a businessman, then?
Yes, he has an interest in several companies in London, but his wife doesn't know exactly what he does. But to continue. He left for London saying that he would bring his little boy home a box of toy bricks. Now, by the merest chance, his wife received a telegram shortly after his departure saying that a parcel of considerable value was waiting for her at the offices of the Aberdeen Shipping Company.
Aberdeen Shipping? Why, their offices are in Fresno Street. I drove by them tonight.
Exactly, and Fresno Street branches out of Upper Swandam Lane, where the Bar of Gold is situated.
Ah, now I'm beginning to understand. Go on, Holmes, go on.
Mrs. St. Clair took a train for London, and at exactly 4:35 on Monday last, found herself walking past the Bar of Gold. Suddenly, she heard a cry, and looking up, was horrified to see her husband beckoning to her from a second-story window.
Great Scott, was he a prisoner, or was he there of his own free will, do you suppose?
Undoubtedly, he was a prisoner. The window was open, and she distinctly saw his face, which she described as being terribly agitated.
Relative.
He waved his hand to her frantically and then vanished from the window so suddenly that it seemed to her that he had been dragged back by some irresistible force from behind.
Gracious me.
One singular point which struck her quick feminine eye was that although he wore the coat he had left for London in, he wore neither collar nor tie.
Well, what did she do?
Rushed down the steps into the bar of gold and attempted to go up the staircase leading to the second floor.
I suppose that Oriental fellow that I talked to tonight stopped her.
Exactly. In fact, he pushed her out of the door and slammed it after her. She rushed down the lane and a few moments later was lucky enough to meet a sergeant and 2 constables.
She took them back with her to the bar of gold, of course.
Yes. They went with her to the room in which Neville St. Clair had last been seen. Of course, there was no sign of him. In fact, on the whole floor, there was no one to be found except a hideous, deformed beggar who seemed to live there. From what Mrs. St. Clair told me, it appears that the sergeant conducted the examination quite intelligently.
You saw your husband at this window, Mrs. Sinclair?
I'm positive, Sergeant.
And the Lascar swears no one's been upstairs this afternoon. Well, he's probably lying. But let's see what this cripple fellow has to say for himself. Here, you.
What do you want with me? I ain't done nothing.
Now, you heard what this lady said. Did you see your husband go in this room a few minutes ago?
I didn't see nobody, and I've been here all the afternoon.
You live here?
Yes.
And you swear on oath that no one's been in this room for the last few hours?
Yes, I do.
Mrs. Sinclair, I know that you think you saw your husband, but don't you suppose...
Look on the table.
It's just a wooden box, Mum.
But I know what's inside it. There, see?
Oh, it's a lot of wooden bricks like kids play with.
My husband came to London today especially to buy them for our son. You can't disbelieve me now, Sergeant.
Don't think I can, Mum. I'll take another look round. Where does this door lead to?
My bedroom. Yeah, you won't find nothing in there.
Oh, we'll look just the same. Hello. There's bloodstains on this window ledge. Fresh bloodstains. How'd you account for that?
Well, I don't know nothing about it.
And the window overlooks the river, just where the water's good and deep, too. Nice place to tip a body out. Here, come here, you.
Yeah, I ain't done nothing.
You've got bloodstains on your right sleeve. What do you got to say about that?
Well, I cut my finger, see? And then I went and opened the window later. That's how the blood got there.
Did you think I was born yesterday? Let's have a look in this chest of drawers. Hello. Hello, whose clothes are these? Pair of trousers, socks, shoes, hat, everything except the coat, eh? Mrs. Sinclair, will you come in here, please, Mum?
What have you found, Sergeant?
These clothes. Are they your husband's, Mum?
Yes, they are. What's happened to him, Sergeant?
I'm afraid he's met with foul play, Mum. And this man knows what happened, only he won't talk.
I don't know nothing, I tell you.
Oh, don't you? Well, I arrest you in the name of the law, and I warn you that anything you say...
And so, Watson, the sergeant arrested this crippled beggar.
No, I'm not surprised. What have they been able to find out about him?
Surprisingly little. His name is Hugh Boone. And he's a professional beggar, quite a successful one, I gather. His pathetic appearance attracts great sympathy. There's a shock of orange hair and a pale face that is disfigured by a horrible scar which has twisted the outer edge of his upper lip.
And he was the last man to see Neville St. Clair alive, eh?
So it would seem. The Lascar downstairs has been cross-examined relentlessly, but he swears that he has no knowledge of the crime.
Have there been any further development?
Oh, yes, old chap. Yes, indeed there have. The ebbing tide gave a fresh clue.
You mean St. Clair's body was washed out?
No, his coat.
What?
With every pocket stuffed with pennies and halfpennies. 421 pennies and 270 halfpennies, to be exact. There's no wonder that it had not been swept away by the tide.
But a human body was a different matter.
Yes, there's a strong eddy between the house and the wharf. It seems likely that the weighted coat had remained when the stripped body had been carried away into the river.
Well, the other clothes were found in the room. Why would the body be dressed in a coat alone?
We can only surmise, old chap, but supposing that this man Boone had thrust Neville St. Clair through the window and into the river, what would he do then?
Try and dispose of the telltale garments.
Yes, that would be logical, wouldn't it? He would seize the coat and be in the act of throwing it out of the window when it would occur to him that it would float and not sink.
So he loaded the pockets with coins to make it sink.
Quite so.
Yes, of course.
But he has little time, for he has heard the scuffle downstairs when Mrs. St. Clair tried to force her way up. He only succeeded in getting as far as throwing the coat out when the police arrived on the scene.
Well, that seems perfectly feasible.
Well, it'll do as a working hypothesis anyway.
Neville St. Clair disappeared on Monday, and yet we still don't know what he was doing in the opium den. What happened to him when he got there, or
or where he is now.
Or what Hugh Boone, the beggar with the twisted lip, had to do with his disappearance. Here we are at our destination.
Well, there's a light burning. Mrs. Sinclair must be waiting up for you.
Yes, poor woman. I hate to return here with no news of her husband, but she's being brave, Watson, extremely brave. We must do everything we can to comfort her.
Dr. Watson, I'm so grateful that you were able to come down and help your friend.
Oh, I only hope that I can be of some help, Mrs. Sinclair.
I see that you have no good news for me, Mr. Holmes.
I'm afraid not.
No bad.
No.
Thank heaven for that. Mr. Holmes, tell me honestly, do you think that Neville is still alive?
Well,
Frankly, no.
Frankly, then I don't.
You think he's murdered?
Oh, I don't say that, but perhaps you see...
And on what day did he meet his death?
On Monday.
Then perhaps, Mr. Holmes, you can explain how I received a letter from him today.
What?
Well, where is the letter, madam?
Here.
Let me see it. This is very crude writing on the envelope. Surely it's not your husband's hand?
No, but the writing in the letter is.
Uh-huh. This letter contained an enclosure.
Yes, there was a ring. His signet ring.
What does the letter say, Holmes?
Dearest, do not be frightened. All will come well. There is a huge error which it may take some little time to rectify. Wait in patience.
And it's signed Neville.
Mm-hmm.
Written in pencil on the flyleaf of a notebook. No watermark. Posted today in Gravesend by a man with a dirty thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And the flap has been gummed, if I'm not mistaken, by a man who has been chewing tobacco.
My husband must be alive, Mr. Holmes.
This might be a clever forgery to put us off the track.
But the signet ring.
Yes, it may have been taken from him.
But the handwriting and then the postmark.
Might have been written on Monday and only posted today.
I won't be discouraged,
Mrs.
Mr. Holmes.
Sinclair, I have no wish to discourage you. I'm just trying to be practical. If your husband is alive and able to write letters, why should he remain away from you?
I can't imagine.
He made no special remarks before leaving on Monday?
No, none. Except to say that he was going to buy the wooden blocks.
When you saw him at the Bar of Gold in Swandam Lane, was the window open?
Yes.
Then he might have called you.
He might.
As I understand it, he gave an inarticulate cry, a call for help, you thought.
Yes, he waved his hands.
But it might have been a cry of surprise. Astonishment at the unexpected sight of you might have caused him to throw up his hands.
I suppose so.
And you thought that he was pulled back from the window.
Yes, because he disappeared so abruptly.
He might have leaped back, mightn't he?
He might have, though I can't think why.
One last question. Had your husband ever shown signs of, taking opium?
Why, no, never, Mr. Holmes. I'm certain the idea would have revolted him.
Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair. Those were the principal points I wanted to be clear on. And now, Watson, I suggest we retire for the night. We may have a busy day ahead of us tomorrow.
I hope you both sleep well. Good night, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson.
Good night, Mrs. Sinclair, and keep up your courage.
Good night, Mrs. Sinclair. We must hope for the best. The clouds seem lighter, though I should not venture to say that danger is over.
You'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second. So I'm just going to remind you that when you buy Petri California sherry, you have a choice of two kinds of sherry. You can choose Petri regular sherry, or if you prefer your sherry dry, not sweet, ask for Petri pale dry sherry. They're both fine wines. And if you don't know which you'd prefer, don't buy one, buy two. Buy them both and try them both. And remember this. Petri Sherry is the perfect all-round, all-occasion wine. It's good before dinner, after dinner, at cocktail time, and any time. Just be sure you get Petri. Petri Sherry. Well, Dr. Watson, you and the great Sherlock Holmes certainly deserved a good night's rest. Did you get it?
I did, Mr. Bartell, but Holmes made no attempt to sleep. As soon as we retired upstairs, he donned a blue silk dressing gown and then wandered about the room, collecting pillows from his bed and cushions from the sofa and the armchairs. With these, he constructed a sort of eastern divan on which he perched himself cross-legged with an ounce of shag tobacco and a box of matches laid out in front of him.
He was all set for a session of thinking, I guess, huh?
Yes, my boy. In the dim light of the lamp, I saw him sitting there, an old briar pipe clenched in his teeth, his eyes fixed vacantly on a corner of the ceiling, the blue smoke curling up from him, silent, motionless. So he sat as I dropped off to sleep, and so he sat when I wakened in the morning to find the summer sun shining into the room. The pipe was still between his lips, the smoke still curled upward, and the room was full of a dense tobacco haze. But nothing remained of the heap of shag which I had seen on the previous night.
Watson. Awake, Watson?
What time is it?
20 minutes past 4.
Lord Holmes, you haven't been to bed.
True, old chap, I had to think. I couldn't allow my brain the luxury of sleeping. You game for a morning drive?
Yes, certainly. I'll get dressed.
Good. No one's stirring yet, but I know where the stable boy sleeps. I'll have the horse and trap out in no time at all.
Oh, where are we going?
To prison. To visit Hugh Boone, the man with the twisted lip.
Holmes, you're unusually excited. What's on your mind?
I want to test a little theory. I think, Watson, that you are now standing in the presence of one of the most absolute fools in Europe. I deserve to be kicked from here to Charing Cross, but I think I have the key to the affair now.
Oh, where is it?
In the bathroom.
What? You're joking, Holmes.
No, I've just been there and removed it. It's in my coat pocket now. Hurry and get dressed, old chap. Then we'll drive over to the prison and see whether my key fits the lock.
Good morning, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson.
Good morning, officer. Good morning.
Well, you're a couple of early birds, and no mistake.
Yes, Constable. We're searching for the proverbial worm. Who's on duty?
Inspector Bradstreet, sir.
Oh,
here he is now.
Good morning, Bradstreet.
Oh, hello, Mr. Holmes. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Inspector.
What can I do for you, gentlemen?
We called about Hugh Boone, the beggar man who is charged with being concerned in the disappearance of Mr. Neville St. Clair. You have him here?
Oh, yes, Mr. Holmes. He's in the cells. I'll take you to him. Follow me, will you, gentlemen?
Thank you.
Well, what kind of a prisoner has he been, Inspector?
Oh, he hasn't given us any trouble, but he's a dirty devil. It's as much as we can do to make him wash his hands. His face is as black as a tinker's.
So he has an aversion to washing, has he?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Well, once his case has been settled, he'll have a regular prison bath, and when you see him, I think you'll agree with me that he needs it. Well, here we are. This is his cell. He's still asleep.
Good Lord, what a filthy, repulsive-looking fellow.
Yes, he's a beauty, isn't he? Want to go in, Mr. Holmes?
Please, Inspector.
Well, he certainly needs a wash.
Yes, I had an idea that he might. That's why I brought this sponge along in my pocket.
Oh, so that was the key that you found in the bathroom.
Oh, you're a funny one, Mr. Holmes, and no mistake. What did you bring a sponge along for?
I'll show you. Is there any water in this cell?
Hey, in the jug on the table there.
Yes. I soak the sponge in the water so, and then apply it to the prisoner's face, so.
Great Scott, his complexion's 3 shades lighter underneath, and the scar on his lip has disappeared.
What are you doing to me?
Now a tug on this mop of red hair, and I think we'll find it's a wig. Yes, come on. That's right. Let me introduce you to Mr. Neville St. Clair of Lee in the county of Kent.
Good Lord, Mr. Holmes, it's the missing man, all right. I recognize him from the photographs.
All right. I'm Neville St. Clair. What am I charged with?
With making away with Mr. Neville St. Oh, no, you can't be charged with that unless we make a case of attempted suicide of it.
Well, since I'm the missing man, then it's obvious that no crime has been committed, and therefore I'm illegally detained.
No crime, but a very great error has been committed. You would have done better to have trusted your wife.
It wasn't only my wife, it was the children. I couldn't bear to have them know that their father was a common beggar. Now you've exposed me. What can I do?
Well, if you leave it to a court of law to clear this matter up, sir, you can hardly avoid newspaper publicity. But if you're perfectly honest with us now, I'm sure that the inspector and Mr. Holmes won't be too hard on you.
No, Mr. St. Clair. Inspector Bradstreet will, I'm sure, make notes on the information that you give us and submit them to the proper authorities. But now, sir, your story, please. Why have you been posing as Hugh Boone, a crippled beggar with a twisted lip?
Well, it's a simple enough story. Some years ago, I was a newspaper reporter. One day, my editor wanted an article on begging in the London metropolis.
I suppose you thought the best way to get your facts was to disguise yourself as a beggar.
Yes, I'd been an actor in my youth, and it wasn't hard for me to adopt a convincing disguise. But that was the point where all my trouble started. On that first day I sat in the London streets, I found to my amazement that I received no less than 26 shillings and 4 pence.
Almost as much as your weekly salary as a reporter, I imagine.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Well, you can imagine how hard it was to settle down to arduous work at £2 a week when I knew that I could earn as much in a couple of days by smearing my face with paint, laying my cap on the ground, and sitting still. Only one man knew my secret.
The Lascar at the Bar of Gold in Upper Swandam Lane, eh?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Mm-hmm. Every morning I would emerge from there dressed as a beggar, and in the evenings I'd return and transform myself into a well-dressed man about town. The fellow was well paid for his rooms, and well, I knew that my secret was safe in his possession.
And when you got married, you couldn't bring yourself to confide in your wife, I suppose.
No, I couldn't. My wife knew that I had a business in the city. She little knew what.
When you saw your wife from the window last Monday, you quickly changed back into the character of the beggar, I suppose.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Of course.
And then weighted my coat and threw it into the river.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think there's anything else I need explain, is there, gentlemen?
One point. The signet ring that you sent your wife.
Well, I knew that she'd be worrying. So I gave it to the Lascar at a moment when no constable was watching me, together with a hastily scribbled note.
That note only reached her last night, Mr. Sinclair.
Last night? Oh, poor Catherine. What a dreadful week she must have spent.
The police have been watching that Lascar. He probably found it difficult to post the letter for you without being spotted.
Yes, I would surmise he gave it to a sailor customer of his to post. A sailor who chewed tobacco and had a dirty thumb. Yes, I think all the ends are tied off very neatly now. One last question, Mr. Sinclair. Have you ever been prosecuted for begging?
Oh, many times, but what was a fine to me?
It's got to stop here and now, Mr. Sinclair. And if the police had asked this thing up, there must be no more of you, Boone, the beggar.
I swear it.
And you must tell your wife the truth at once. If you'd done that a long time ago, you'd have saved both of yourselves a very great deal of misery, sir.
I shall tell her everything.
Well, Mr. Holmes, we're very much obliged to you for having cleared this matter up. I wish I knew how you reached your results, though.
Well, in this case, my dear Inspector, I reached them by sitting upon 5 pillows and consuming an ounce of shag tobacco. I only wish that all my problems might be solved so comfortably.
Doctor, that was some story. Imagine arresting a man for committing a murder and then finding out that he's the fellow who's supposed to be dead.
It is a bit bewildering, isn't it?
You said it. Boy, being a detective sure has its surprises. Nothing like that ever happens to me.
Oh, come. One would believe to hear you talk that you lead a very uneventful life.
Oh, but I do, Doctor, I do. Why, I never get any surprises. Look, I tell our friends that Petri wine is always good wine. And what happens?
Oh, what does happen?
Everybody agrees it's good wine, and that's that. Well, it's just got to be. After all, the Petri family has been making wine for generations. Winemaking is their heritage. A heritage passed on down from father to son, from father to son, from generation to generation. The Petri family knows full well the art of turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine. And because the making of Petri wine is a family affair, you can be sure that the name Petri on a bottle of wine really stands for something. It's your assurance that every drop of wine in that bottle is good wine. No matter what type wine you prefer, you'll never go wrong with a Petri wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes adventure are you planning to tell us next week?
Well, now let me see. Next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a weird story of violence and of sudden death that struck without warning. I call it The Strange Adventure of the Uneasy Easy Chair.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was adapted by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Man with the Twisted Lip. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invite you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting story about his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. As for me, instead of telling you something, I'd like to ask you something. Do you like chicken? How do you like it best? Roasted, fried, or in a stew with dumpling? Well, whatever your favorite may be, you'll like that chicken infinitely better when it's served with a glass of Petri California Sauterne. Now there's a combination. Chicken and Petri Sauterne. Petri Sauterne is a white wine, pale golden in color, delicately fragrant, and clear as crystal. And what a flavor that Petri Sauterne has. I'm telling you, Petri Sauterne is just about the last word in dinner wine. Oh, one more tip. Remember to serve Petri Sauterne with fish or any kind of seafood. Good, it's great. To be sure you have a glass of good wine, be sure it's Petri wine. And now I'm sure our good friend Dr. Watson's expecting us. Let's go in and join him. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell. Punctual to the minute, as usual. Draw up a chair and settle down, my boy.
Well, I won't settle down too far, Doctor. You have a habit of keeping me on the edge of my chair during most of your stories.
Just as should be, Mr. Bartell. I hope tonight will prove no exception, so light up your pipe and I'll get on with my story.
Doctor, from the hint you gave us last week, it sounded like quite a thriller. How did it begin?
On a cold winter morning in 1897, Holmes and I, our breakfast just concluded, sat on either side of a cheery fire in our Baker Street lodging. Thick fog rolled down between the line of dun-colored houses, and the opposite windows loomed like dark, shapeless blurs through the heavy yellow reef.
Another London pea souper, huh, Doctor?
Exactly, Mr. Bartell. Our gas was lit and shone its flickering light on the white cloth and glimmer of china, for the breakfast table had not been cleared. Holmes was busy cross-indexing his record of crime, while I was engrossed in one of Clark Russell's fine sea stories. Our morning was not destined, however, to be a quiet one. Shortly after 11 o'clock, Mrs. Hudson ushered a young lady into our room. A young lady... young lady, I'm Dr. Watson, and this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
How do you do, gentlemen? I must apologize for not giving my name to your housekeeper, but I have to be so careful.
Yes, we quite understand, my dear.
Of course, you're wondering who I am and what's brought me here.
My own theory would be that you are Miss Harriet Irving, and that you've come to me to elicit my aid in proving that Mr. Binion did not murder your father.
Holmes, what on earth are you talking about?
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Holmes. But how did you know?
I deduced it, Miss Irving. You're wearing very new and extremely expensive mourning, presumably for the first time, since a few basting threads are still in evidence. You wear no rings, so evidently you're not in mourning for a husband. The only man whose death the papers announced in the past few days and who left a young daughter wealthy enough to purchase such garments is Sir Edward Irving. And since the police have already made an arrest, obviously wish me to disprove the police theory and intercede for young Binion.
Mr. Holmes, you're wonderful. That's just what I want you to do. You will, won't you?
Miss Irving, I've studied the newspaper reports very carefully. It would seem to me that Scotland Yard has arrested the right man.
Well, I'm very sorry, but I didn't read the newspaper reports. I haven't the faintest idea what you're both talking about.
Then let me bring you up to date, my dear fellow. And please correct me, Miss Irvin, if I make any mistakes. Now, 3 days ago, Sir Edward Irvin, the father of this young lady, was found stabbed to death in his study.
Well,
The only entrance to the study is through an anteroom, where his secretary had been sitting ever since Sir Edward was last seen alive. And the secretary swore that no one had entered or left the study.
Secretary's name being Binion, I suppose.
Yes, under the circumstances, it's hard to see that any other arrest was possible.
And yet I know he's innocent, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, and how do you know that, Miss Irvin?
We were in love. We were going to be married. I don't care what the police say. A woman knows these things. Robert Binion did not kill my father.
Did your father approve of the engagement?
Well, no, not exactly.
If one were to be exact, Miss Irvin, wouldn't one say that your father absolutely forbade the marriage?
Yes, he did.
And Inspector Lestrade assumed that was the motive for the murder.
Well, sounds logical, I must say.
Does your father have any other relatives living, Miss Irvin?
His brother, my Uncle Peregrine, he lives a hermit's life in the country. We've seen very little of him in the last few years.
Was he left anything under your father's will?
No, I was the sole beneficiary. Please help me, Mr. Holmes. If you'll just talk to Robert, you'll know he's not guilty.
Oh, there's no harm in talking to him, Holmes. After all, our old friend Lestrade handled the case, and he's made a good many mistakes in the past.
Oh, haven't we all, old chap? Well, Miss Irvin, I'll do what I can, but I promise nothing.
That's you, Mr. Holmes.
Where is your fiancé being held?
At Scotland Yard. I talked to him there just before I came to you.
Scotland Yard, eh? Splendid. We can talk to Lestrade at the same time. Watson, your hat...
My hat and coat?
Precisely, old fellow, your hat and coat.
So, Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson think they know more than the Yard, eh? Come over here to teach us our business, I suppose.
Nothing of the sort, Lestrade. We came over here to make a few inquiries.
I tell you, gentlemen, that you're wasting your time. Young Binion is guilty, whatever his young lady may say.
Lestrade?
Yes, Mr. Holmes?
What did the autopsy prove?
Well, got a report of it here on my desk, but it won't tell you nothing you don't know.
Death was instantaneous, caused by some weapon like a long needle, a fine stiletto, or an ice pick, penetrating the brain at the base of the skull.
And no such weapon was found in the room.
Or on Mr. Binion.
True, sir. Then he had the chance of disposing of it.
Just the same, the murder weapon hasn't been found, has it?
No, Doctor, but we'll find it. Don't you worry about that.
I should like to talk to the prisoner, if you don't mind.
Oh, of course I don't mind. He's in the detention cell just down the corridors from here. Follow me, gentlemen.
Has he given you any trouble, Lestrade?
Trouble? If all our prisoners were as quiet as him, we wouldn't need no guards, Doctor. Nice, quiet young fellow. Hard to realize he's a murderer.
A fact that still has to be proven in court, Lestrade.
A fact that is going to be proved in court, Mr. Holmes. Well, here we are at this cell. You've got visitors, Binion. Very distinguished visitors.
My name is Holmes, Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
I'm sorry to see you in this plight.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Then Harriet did come and see you when she left here. I'm so glad. You'll get me out of this mess. I know you will.
Even Mr. Sherlock Holmes can't get you out of this one, young fellow, my
Mr.
lad.
Binion, I promised your fiancé that I'd try and help you. My obvious course is to go to Sir Edward's house and examine the room in which the tragedy occurred. But before I do that, I'd like to ask you a question or two.
Ask me any question you want to, sir.
It was you who discovered the body, I understand.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Please describe the circumstances.
Sir Edward was in his study. I'd been working in the anteroom adjoining. I went in to say goodnight to him, and I found him slumped in his chair, dead, with blood streaming down the back of his head. Of course, I sent the butler for the police at once.
Could anyone have entered that room without your knowledge?
No, Mr. Holmes, I never left my desk. And there was no other entrance to the room save through my office.
Well, how about the windows in Edward's room?
They were locked from the inside, Doctor.
You don't need to worry. We examined the window ledges, not a mark. No one came in that way.
Now, what is your theory of the murder, Mr. Binion?
I haven't one, Mr. Holmes. I'm completely baffled. I'm certain that no one entered that room. Yet I swear to you that I didn't stab him. I can understand the police believing I did.
Lestrade, I should like to examine the room in which Sir Edward was murdered.
Well, easiest thing in the world, Mr. Holmes. I'll drive over with you if you like. His house is in Knightsbridge.
Oh, you needn't bother, Lestrade. We can quite well go by ourselves.
I'd like to come with you.
Oh, why, Lestrade? You're convinced Mr. Binion is guilty, are you? Won't you be wasting your time?
Not me. For once I know you're on the wrong side of a case, Mr. Holmes. I want to be there and see your faces when you find it out. This is the house, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, imposing looking place, I must say. I imagine, Lestrade, that you still have a police guard inside.
Oh, yes, Doctor. There's been a sergeant guarding the dead man's room day and night. We still haven't found the missing weapon, you know.
Yes, gentlemen.
I'm Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard. We wish to examine the house.
I must see your identification, sir.
What are you talking about? I've been in and out of this house half a dozen times.
I have my orders, sir.
Oh, very well.
Is Miss Irvin at home? Miss Irvin is not receiving, sir.
Great Scotland, can't you give us any information?
There's been tragedy in this house, sir, and the truth of it's not known yet. I'm not answering any questions that I don't have to.
Here now. Does this police guard satisfy you?
Inspector Lestrade. Very good, Inspector. You may come in. May I direct you, gentlemen?
No, thank you. I know this house nearly as well as you do.
I think not, Inspector. I've served here for 27 years. Now, gentlemen, if you're not needing me, I'll return to my quarters.
Bless my soul. Sinister looking chap if I ever saw one.
Yes, and he knows something. You see, Lestrade, there is a possibility that Binion is innocent.
Yes, I began to see that, sir, when you were talking to the butler.
You're being very cryptic. What other possibility are you talking about?
The possibility that Binion, the arrested man, is shielding the real murderer. And whom would he be most certain to shield?
You mean his fiancée, Miss Irvin?
That's right, old fellow.
What?
Here we are. This is the ante-room where young Binion worked. And that door there leads into the study where Sir Edward was found.
Nothing been touched, of course, since the discovery of the crime?
Oh, no, Mr. Holmes. That's why we've had a constable on duty in there night and day. Before the trial, we're bringing experts in to test the room for secret panels or anything of that kind.
Let's examine the dead man's room, shall we?
Right you are, Mr. Holmes. Webster. Webster, get out of that chair and stand up, can't you? You're on duty.
Asleep. Carty. Dead.
Yes. The trickle of blood oozing out from the base of his skull.
Well, strike me pink. He's being killed the same way as Sir Edward was.
I presume you'll agree that Mr. Binion didn't commit this murder, Lestrade.
Oh, of course not, Mr. Holmes. He couldn't have done it. He's locked up at the yard. Well, what are we going to do?
Ask the butler to come here, will you?
Oh, right you are, sir. What do you make of the wound, Doctor?
Fit the description of the one that killed Sir Edward. A fine puncture here at the base of the skull. By Jove, Holmes, they mentioned a stiletto or an ice pick. A wound like this might be caused by one of those long steel hat pins that women wear.
Yes, it's a possibility, Watson, a distinct possibility. And Miss Irvin was wearing a long hat pin this morning, if you remember. Plastered walls. Little chance of secret panels here, I should say.
The window's locked from the inside, eh?
Here he is, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, yes, and by the way, what's your name?
Travers, sir.
You see what's happened, Travers?
Yes, sir, I see. The constable's being killed just like my master.
Now, tell me, Travers, is this room exactly as it was in Sir Edward's lifetime?
Yes, sir. Except that my master was not in the habit of keeping the corpses of policemen in here.
Here, don't try to be funny, Travers. Don't you realize you're mixed up in a murder case?
I meant no offense, gentlemen.
Marked in bad taste, my good fellow.
The point of my question, Travers, was to find out if any of the furniture in here had been moved lately.
Not moved, sir. But there has been a piece of furniture added. That armchair the dead man's lying in.
The same chair in which Sir Edward's body was found. Of course, that's the answer. Travers, when was that chair delivered? And who delivered it?
It was delivered the day before Sir Edward died. It came from Silver Schwartz's antique shop in Bond Street, sir.
That game's afoot, Mr. Hart. See to the removal of this poor man's body. Seal the room, and for heaven's sake, keep this latest death a secret for a day at least. Within that time, I hope to have your murderer for you.
Then we're going...
We're going, my dear chap, to Silver Schwanz's antique shop in Bond Street.
Those old music boxes are quite charming, Holmes, aren't they?
Yes, but where's Mr. Silberschwanz?
Probably him. What a fine-looking old fellow.
Oh, Mr. Silberschwanz.
Yes, gentlemen. You are interested in musical boxes?
No, sir, in chairs. Particularly in the handsomely carved chair you delivered to Sir Edward Irvin a few days ago.
Ah, yeah, magnificent specimen. He's pleased with it.
He was found dead in it, Mr. Silvershore.
And half an hour ago, someone else was found dead in it also. That chair was one of a pair, wasn't it?
Yeah. Lieber Gott im Himmel. That's impossible. Please to follow me. I will show you it's not possible. Look at the chair.
Exactly like the same one as Sir Edward's house.
Oh, my friend, but there's such a difference.
15th century Italian, isn't it?
Yeah, this is one of a pair of the famous Malipiero armchair. There are only 3 pairs in the world, my friend. Of this pair, one, the one I delivered to Sir Edward, is simply a great specimen of the carver's art. This one, it's made. Looks exactly like it, does it not?
Exactly. I can't see any difference myself.
You would if you sat in it, old chap.
Precisely. That is why I have these cords stretched from one arm of the chair to the other. If anyone were to sit in it well, sometimes nothing will happen. But sooner or later, a hand will press on this hidden spring in the arm here, and death will strike.
But nothing happened when you pressed the spring then, Mr. Silverstone?
No, I don't understand.
I do. This is the harmless chair. The lethal one was sent to Sir Edward. He sat in it, accidentally pressed the spring, and drove the fatal needle into his brain.
Just as that poor constable did today.
Sir Edward bought both chairs, I presume?
Yeah, I would not so. No,
and why didn't you deliver both at the same time?
He was afraid of the dead level. He asked me to keep it here until he found a safe place for it in his home.
Some devil switched the arm cord from the fatal chair to the harmless one, so that you delivered death to Sir Edward. There is a subtlety in this crime worthy of the fiendish maker of the chairs himself. Silberschwartz.
Yeah, mein Herr.
Didn't Malipieri die of being tricked into seating himself in one of his own chairs?
Yeah, he did.
Poetic justice. I'm much obliged to you, Silberschwartz. Now I think I know how to trap our killer.
Dr. Watson will bring you the rest of his story in just a second, so I'm just going to tell you that after a good dinner, there's nothing quite like a glass of good Petri California port. Petri port is really a wonderful wine. A deep, hearty red in color, and rich and truly delicious in flavor. You know, port wine is actually America's favorite wine. Try a glass of Petri port, and you'll know why. Petri port is not only fine after dinner, it's perfect whenever good friends get together. Just keep in mind the name Petri, because Petri wines are good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, this is quite a story you're telling us tonight. So you found out how the murders had been committed, but not who'd been responsible for it.
That's quite right, Mr. Bartell. Holmes spent a long time cross-examining Mr. Silverschwanz, the owner of the antique store, as to who might have had the opportunity of switching the telltale cord to the fatal chair.
And who did have that opportunity,
Well,
Doctor?
Mr. Bartell, it transpired that 4 people might have been responsible. Edward's daughter, the secretary, Mr. Binion, had both been in the shop with him at various times. So had the butler, Travers. The 4th suspect was Sir Edward's eccentric brother, Peregrine, who it appeared had dropped into the shop the day after the purchase had been made. With this last information, Holmes became very excited and launched into eager preparations, which ended a few hours later when we found ourselves disguised as furniture removers, driving a van along a quiet country lane near Dorking as we approached the house of Sir Edward's brother, Peregrine.
There's the house, Watson. Ramshackle-looking place, isn't it?
Yes, extremely so.
Why are you so morose, my dear chap? Hardly spoken a word on our drive down
You never
here.
tell me anything. Why are we trundling off into the wilds of the country disguised as furniture removers, carrying the harmless chair with us?
Surely the reason is transparent, old chap?
Yes, it's just about as transparent as Gough stocking full of hot tripe.
Oh, my dear Watts, surely it's obvious that we're up against an extremely cunning murderer. Now, what advantage accrues to him in using the Malapiero chair?
An alibi, of course. He's nowhere near the place where the murder happened.
Precisely. Apply your logic a little further. 3 of the suspects, the daughter, Mr. Binion, and Travers, the butler, live in the house and would almost certainly have been present at the time of death. Therefore, who gains most by such an alibi?
Well, the brother, Peregrine.
Elementary, my dear Watson. Now you see why we trundled off into the wilds of Dorking.
Well, that must be Peregrine standing up the porch. He seems a funny-looking fellow.
Oh, my lead, Watson.
Good afternoon, Governor. You fellows must have come to the wrong house.
You were Mr. Peregrine Irvine, ain't you, Governor?
Yes.
And we come to the right house. All right, all right, all right. Come on, Bertie, give us a hand.
Right to you or our feet.
What the devil are you unloading an armchair?
Come on, get on there, Charlie. You drop it on my foot, Bertie. Look here. Easy does it. Come on, Bert. That's right.
I got it.
All right. Let her down easy now on the porch here.
There you go. That's it.
Give me the crickets. Ain't that a pretty chair, Governor? Bertie and me was admiring it on our way down here.
Cool, blimey, it's half a nice chair.
Who told you to bring it here?
Orders, Governor. Mr. Silver Snitch, whatever his name is, told us your brother didn't want the chair and said as how we was to bring it to you.
But my brother's dead.
Mr. Silver Snitch said he gave the order before he died. Mind if I sit down in it, Governor?
Oh, no, of course not, of course not.
Cool, lummy. Bit of all right, isn't it?
Look at him laughing.
Who wish me old Trouble and Strife could see me now?
Trouble and Strife?
Yeah. Trouble and Strife. That's me wife, Governor. Here, sit down yourself, sir. Come on, go on. Sit down, try it. Go on, Governor. Take the weight off your plates of meat.
What barbaric jargon do you speak? What on earth are plates of meat?
Plates of meat is feet, Governor. That's rhyming slang.
That's right. Rhyming slang. Go on, sit down in it. Go on.
All right, very well.
There now. Ain't that comfortable?
Yeah, very.
Go on. Run your hands up the arms, Governor. Ain't that carving pretty? Ain't it just ducky?
Yes, it is. But I don't want the wretched thing. There's been some mistake. So you'd better take it back to London and tell them to sell it. I don't want anything of my brother.
Jump into Jehoshaphat. Can't see where you don't want to sit in a nice chair like this, Governor. But you're the one that gives the orders around here. Come on, Bertie. Come on, get your back into it.
All right, Alfie.
Let's get back in the van. All right, come on.
Alfie.
Away they go. Oh, bless your heart, Governor. We don't worry about that sort of thing, do we, Bertie?
Of course not, Alfie. We had a nice drive in the country anyhow, didn't we?
That's right. Let's get these old horses going. Good day, Governor.
Good day,
Governor. Good. That was a false trail, Holmes. Obviously, he knew nothing about the chair. He thought it was perfectly harmless.
And, as indeed it was. But the murderer would have thought it fatal. I've slipped up in my reasoning somehow, confound. Oh, but of course. Oh, what a fool I am. We must get back to London as fast as these tired nags can take us. Come on, get up there. Get up.
What's the next move, Holmes?
Back to St. Edward's house and the staging of a little drama that I'm sure will give us the final answer to this problem. Arrangements, Mr. Strand?
Yes, Mr. Holmes, I've got Miss Irving, young Binion, and the butler waiting outside. And no one knows we switched the chairs.
Splendid.
You're sure that this is the harmless chair, Holmes?
Of course I am. Look here. I sit in it. So, run my hands over the arms. Yes, this chair is harmless, as every person save one will know. Throw them in, Mr. Strand.
All at once, Mr. Holmes?
No, I think we'll take Miss Irvin and Mr. Binion first.
Oh, right you are, sir. Irvin, Mr. Binion, come in, please.
Very well. Oh, Mr. Holmes.
What's the matter, Miss Irvin?
It's just so horrible seeing you there in the same chair where I saw Father.
Oh.
Mr. Holmes, it's a trifle too macabre for you to assume the position of the corpse. Please get up.
But it seems to be the most comfortable chair in the room, and I do like my comfort when I interrogate witnesses. However, it's hardly chivalrous, is it? Miss Irvin, please sit down, won't you?
I don't like to sit down in the chair in which Father died.
Oh, Miss Irving, we couldn't bear to see you standing.
Very well, then.
Don't sit down, Harry.
Why not, Binion? What's the matter? Isn't the chair safe?
No, it's
Then perhaps you care to sit in it. To prove that the chair is safe.
No,
Sit down.
Very well. There.
Splendid. Curious chair, isn't it, Mr. Binion? I wonder about these carvings on the arms. They look almost as if they might activate concealed springs. I wonder what would happen if I...
No, for heaven's sakes, Mr. Holmes, you're trying to kill me.
Kill you? Then you know how Sir Edward and the policeman were murdered, eh?
I knew it must have something to do with the chair.
You knew more than that, Robert. You planned it. I remember now that when we went to the shop,
Be quiet, Harry.
Come there, you!
No, Watson, don't go after them. The stride will stop him. In any case, the police are at the door. Oh, I'm tired. I think I'll sit in this rather fateful armchair.
So it was young Binion all the time, eh?
Yes, and he all but outsmarted me. I reasoned that somehow the murderer must have intended the device of this chair to clear him. And suddenly I saw the real motivation. How better establish his innocence than seeming to be obviously guilty, and yet leaving a trail whereby an astute deduction could seem to clear him.
Yeah? His idea that Miss Irving came to you. He used you as a cat's paw.
That's right, Watson. I'm afraid this whole case is a rather humiliating experience for me.
Well, why do you say that?
Lestrade had arrested the right man in the first place. Oh, my dear Watson, I shall never hear the end of this. Never.
As usual, Doctor, that was a swell story. Imagine Lestrade accidentally arresting the right man.
Well, he had that one coming to him. Poor fellow, he'd been outwitted by Holmes so many times he was beginning to get an inferiority complex.
What about Miss Irving? How did she take it when her boyfriend Binion had proved guilty?
Well, when she realized that her sweetheart had actually murdered her father, as they say in the penny thrillers, her love turned to hate. But at first, she took it pretty bad.
I can imagine so.
Mr. Bartell, my boy, that's one of the disadvantages of being a detective. When you bring the guilty to justice, you very often cause the innocent to suffer too. Believe me, never become a detective. Stick to being a wine expert.
You calling me a wine expert? Now, wait a minute, Doctor. All I know about wine is that it either tastes good or it doesn't. And I know that Petri wine always does taste good. And I know why, too. It's because the Petri family has been making wine for generations. The art of turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine is their heritage. A heritage handed down within the Petri family from father to son, from father to son. What particular type wine you prefer is, of course, a matter of your personal taste. But let me assure you of this. Whatever type wine you desire, for any occasion, you can depend on any wine that bears the Petri label. Petri took time to bring you good wine. And today, that name Petri is the proudest name in the long history of America's wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes adventure are you planning to tell us next week?
Next week, Mr. Bartell. Now, let me see. Next week, I'm going to tell you a strange story that took place in one of the smaller states of Middle Europe. It concerns a young prince, a most unusual concert, and a beautiful contralto who sang 2 days after we'd seen her die at the hands of the firing squad. I call the story The Haunting of Sherlock Holmes.
Doctor, that's one I've got to listen to.
Yes, Mr. Bartell. And everyone should also listen to what Secretary of Agriculture Anderson says about saving used kitchen fat. We've all got to keep turning in every bit of used fat. Take it to your meat dealer. The shortage of fat is worse now than ever it was. And unless we help, and we all help, we'll all be faced with a serious shortage of soap. Yes, and a serious shortage of paint, lubricating oils, drugs, and many other things that require fat in their manufacture. It's up to us to keep turning in every bit of used kitchen fat.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Musgrove Ritual. Music is by Dean Falsler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studio. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and the New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And say, if you'd like to try a new adventure in good eating, will you just make sure that your dinner tomorrow night includes a bottle of Petri California Burgundy. Petri Burgundy is the ideal wine with any kind of meat or meat dish. A Petri Burgundy is a hearty red wine, just as rich in flavor as it is in color. It's the perfect companion to a thick, juicy steak or a piping hot pot roast or a good hamburger. You know that Petri Burgundy has a happy faculty of turning a simple meal, like, say, a hamburger sandwich, into a feast. Believe me, here is a wine that's clear, fragrant, and delicious. A wine that you can serve to your friends proudly. Petri Burgundy. Remember, the name Petri is the proudest name in the history of America's wines. And now let's join our good friend, Dr. Watson.
I'm out here on the patio, Mr. Bartell.
Well, I see you're making the most of a wonderful evening, Doctor.
Oh, yes, my boy. It's pleasant to sit out here on a summer's night with a good friend and a pipe, a bottle of wine. Help yourself to a glass and sit down.
Well, thank you, sir. All ready with tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure, Doctor?
Yes, and a strange story it is. It was in the autumn of 1899, Mr. Bartell, that I decided both as doctor and friend that Sherlock Holmes was in desperate need of a holiday.
He'd really been overdoing it, huh?
Oh, yes, my boy. It had been an unusually busy year, and at the time my story begins, Holmes was suffering from complete exhaustion. So, my boy, towards the end of October in that year, we found ourselves in the charming city of Kazanlak, capital of the small Balkan kingdom of Grozny. A few nights after our arrival, I remember Pavlu Krasnodar, Groznian minister of police, took us to hear the singing of a certain young Hungarian opera star, Miss Lily Rayner, who was then touring Europe. At our table was her fiancé, the charming young aristocrat Prince Stefano. And it was very easy to see as he sat there listening to the song that the boy was head over heels in love. It was a haunting melody that she sang, Mr. Bartell. I can almost hear it now. You're a very lucky man, Prince Stefano. Your fiancée's voice matches her beauty.
Oh, yes, Dr. Watson. I consider myself the most fortunate man in Grozny.
She has a magnificent voice, the finest singing I can recall since...
Since when, Mr. Holmes?
I was thinking of a prima donna of the Warsaw Opera who attained considerable success in London. Miss Irene Adler.
Oh, by George, yes. She was a criminal, one of the few that outwitted you, Holmes. Oh, that was a case that would have interested you, Mr. Krasnodar.
I'm familiar with it, my dear doctor. You are unusually solemn tonight, Krasnodar. Have a glass of wine, and I will bring Lily to our table, and we will toast our happiness. I'm afraid I cannot drink to that toast, Prince Stefano. Why not? Oh, I know why. You, the notorious lady killer of Grozny, are jealous. You're in love with Lily yourself. Oh. Prince Stefano, I have sad news for you. I have come here tonight, but for one purpose. To arrest your fiancée.
What?
You're joking. It is far from a joke. At my ministry, we have evidence, conclusive evidence, that Miss Lily Rayner is a spy.
Spy? Good Lord.
And the penalty for spying in Grozny?
Ah, that, my friend, is why I would drink no toast. In Grozny, the penalty for espionage is death.
Yes, I know, but Holmes, you must do something to save that girl. You can't just turn in for the night without trying to help her in some way. They might shoot her in the morning.
Krasnodar's no fool. Since he's made the arrest, obviously he has a watertight case against the girl.
I suppose so.
One last pipe.
You know, Holmes, I couldn't understand her fiancé's behavior. He didn't do a thing. Just stood there and let Krasnodar arrest the girl.
What could he have done? Krasnodar is commissioner of police. There was no point in arguing with him until the evidence had been examined.
I imagine the prince will try and pull some political strings. After all, Grozny...
Come in.
Who's this now?
Oh, you wish to speak to me?
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I've come to talk to you about my baby. My name is Martha Greggett.
Your baby? Mr. Holmes doesn't...
Oh, my baby, she is 20 years old, and she is flaxen-haired and beautiful.
Oh, that's an entirely different matter. We'll be delighted to help you, delighted. Sit down, won't you?
On whose behalf have you come to me?
Poor Lily Rayner.
Lily Rayner? Well, that's the girl who's arrested tonight.
I am only her dresser. And yet I'm Martha Greggett. I'm her mother and father. I have toured Europe with her ever since she left Vienna.
She sent you to me tonight, I suppose.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. She said you would understand.
What does she mean by that, I wonder?
She said that Mr. Holmes would take care that a talent like hers should not perish, just because she had broken a few laws.
In other words, she wishes me to establish her innocence in the same breath as she confesses her guilt. I'm afraid I don't take that sort of client. Good night to you.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson.
Krasnodar?
I am glad that you came to my office this morning. I can show you the proof of Miss Lily Rayner's guilt. As distinguished foreigners, I should like you to know that though the penalty for political crimes is swift and severe, we are most careful that the incriminating evidence is beyond question. You see these letters?
Yeah.
We found them sewed into the bodies of her gown.
Oh, good gracious me.
They're a series of highly dangerous letters from Joseph, the leader of the Revolutionary Party with whom she is obviously hand in glove. Here, you may examine them if you wish.
Say, it looks like Greek to me.
My knowledge of the Groznian language is far from perfect, but these letters certainly seem to incriminate their owner beyond doubt.
You will observe that the letters have followed her to each of the cities in which she has been singing. All of them ask questions as to the military garrisons and the chances of a successful revolution. She has been a dangerous spy.
Yes, I can see that, sir. But even so, isn't the death penalty excessively severe, particularly for a woman?
Dr. Watson, the Balkan states are a hotbed of European intrigue. Our penalties must be severe, and we cannot make concessions to the sex of a culprit.
This man Joseph, the writer of these letters, have you been able to find any trace of him?
None. If only we could. But we have never even seen the man. However, we are fortunate to trap his assistant and apparently the lady of his choice.
Lady of his choice? But she was engaged to Prince Stefano.
Undoubtedly a blind. In her home, we found an unsigned love letter in English. It was in the same handwriting as these letters from Joseph.
Are you satisfied, Watson?
Well, I suppose.
Obviously, she's guilty. Well, there's no place for me in this affair, particularly when you consider that she made a virtual confession in sending her dresser to me last night.
I suppose you're right. If you want to trap this man Josip, I should think you'd be wiser to hold the girl as a hostage. It might bring him on the scene if he's afraid she'll talk. If you hang her, you'll never find him.
Dr. Watson, in my country we found that prompt justice gets the best results. And for your edification, we do not hang in Grozny.
No?
The death penalty is exacted at the hands of a firing squad.
And when is the execution to take place?
You have timed your visit well, my friends. Please to step onto the balcony.
Oh, dear.
I think that answers your question, Mr. Holmes.
Great Scott. Against the wall, blindfolded, with a firing squad before her. It's Lily Rayner.
Groznian justice indeed moves swiftly, Mr. Krasnodar.
It has to, my friend. Capitano!
Great heavens, I can't watch this. I don't care what she's done. I don't want to see it. She's crumbled to the ground. Poor little thing.
What an artist.
Hard to see a woman executed even if she is a spy.
May all traitors to Groznia die as swiftly.
Oh, but what a loss. Her beautiful voice.
Yes, her beautiful voice. Shall we go in, gentlemen?
You know, Holmes, I can still see that poor girl as she crumbled before the firing squad.
So can I, old chap.
That's her song you're playing, isn't it?
Yes. The melody still haunts me. You blame me, don't you?
Blame you for what?
For not preventing her death.
Oh, of course I don't blame you, Holmes. The girl was guilty. Groznian law prescribes the death penalty for her crime. After all, what could you have done about it?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And yet...
And yet what?
I wonder if she was right. I wonder if artistry such as hers isn't of greater value to humanity than spying in any cause.
It's not much good worrying about that now, is it? The girl's dead and buried.
Watson.
What's the matter, Holmes?
Did you hear that?
I hear what?
I can swear that I heard the dead girl's voice. She was singing her song to my accompaniment.
Oh, really? Your nurse must be in a very bad state, Holmes. Hearing voices indeed. You'd better turn in for the night.
Perhaps. Well, it may be more my conscience than my nerves.
I'll give you a sleeping draught if you like.
No, my dear Shepard. I'm all right. It's funny, though. I could have sworn that... Oh, well.
Play some more of that tune, will you, Holmes? Great heavens!
Uh-huh. You heard it this time, eh, Watson?
Of course I did. It was her voice. There's no mistaking it. Holmes, I don't believe in ghosts, and yet I could swear that...
Listen.
Good Lord. It is her.
Do not let them go and punish that killed me.
Who are you? Where are you?
In the air about you. Avenge my death.
Strike a match,
Sherlock
Watson.
Holmes.
Strike a match. Yes. Light the gas.
Look. There in the moonlight, moving past the window. It's the figure of that girl that was shot to death.
A match, Watson. I'll guard the door.
There. Gas is lighted, but she's vanished, Holmes.
Not by means of this door. We're standing in front of it. And there's no other exit from the room.
Holmes, I don't like this. We're dabbling in the supernatural.
Stop trembling, Watson. Whatever the explanation for this may be, one thing at least I find quite fascinating.
And what's that?
It's the first time in my career that I've ever had a ghost for a client.
Dr. Watson will tell us the rest of his story in just a second, so I'm just going to tell you about a wine that adds the perfect finishing touch to a good meal. Petri California Muscatel. With its sunshiny golden color and its full aroma, you just know Petri Muscatel is going to taste good. And it really does. The flavor of big, plump Muscat grapes picked when they're full to bursting with luscious juice. For the wine that everybody likes, serve Petri Muscatel. You know it's good if it's Petri. Well, Dr. Watson, so you had a ghostly visitor calling on you at the hotel that night, huh?
Yes, my boy, and I confess I was so badly shaken by the experience that I I hardly slept a wink all night. Well, the next morning, after an early breakfast, Holmes and I located the proprietor of our hotel and began to question him as to the history of the building.
I've admired the architecture of this building ever since we came here. A house of this period would undoubtedly have been built with secret passages and staircases.
I confess that I know of one secret staircase there. There may well be others.
Indeed, and where is the one you know of?
Do you wish to explore it, gentlemen?
Oh, very much. My friend and I are most interested in such things.
Follow me, please. These stairs lead to our wine cellars. Thousands of feet have tramped up and down these steps. Only a select few know that behind this tapestry, gentlemen, is apparently a solid wall. But the wall is not solid. You have a match, perhaps.
Oh, yes, of course. Here you are.
We keep a candle here in this niche for just such an occasion as this. So, please hold back tapestry, sir.
Oh, I've got it.
Thank you. Now, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4... The fourth brick up from the stair. I press it so, and...
Look, Holmes. Great Scott, a section of the wall swinging out.
Disclosing a stairway behind it. Ingenious.
There, gentlemen. Allow me to give you the candle.
But aren't you going to lead the way?
No, sir. I'm not going to lead the way, thank you. I have owned this hotel for 32 years, and yet I have never explored this stairway.
Why, sir? Is it reputed to be haunted?
Yes, it is supposed to be haunted. The candle, gentlemen.
Thank you. Yes, I'm much obliged to you. Come on, Watson.
I shall wait here.
I don't think I care for this, Holmes. It's frightfully dark in here. It's damp and moldy, too.
Look, Watson. Look here. This landing.
Landing? Nothing but dust and cobwebs.
Closer, old chap. There's the faint imprint of a woman's heel here.
Oh, by George, yes. Shoes that have gone both up and down these stairs in the last 24 hours.
Exactly. And there's a reverse print over here. This, my dear chap, I think accounts for the appearance and disappearance of our visitor last night.
Yes, but Holmes, it was the singer, Lily Rayner. Yet we saw her shot yesterday morning.
Rubbish, Watson, rubbish. What have we to do with walking corpses? Come on, old fellow. Let's see where this stairway leads us to.
No, but then what did we see if we didn't see a ghost last night?
That, my dear chap, is what we have to find out. Wait a minute. Staircase ends here. That's strange.
Yes, and against a blank wall. That doesn't make sense.
And yet the entrance to this stairway was an apparent blank wall, too, remember? Let's see if the same formula will do the same trick here.
What was it? Oh, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4.
4 bricks up from the step. I press so and... Open sesame.
The wall swinging back again.
What do we see? Another tapestry. A tapestry that seems very familiar.
Well, I should say so. This hidden door leads into your very own bedroom.
Exactly, my dear chap. Now we know beyond doubt how the apparent ghost made her appearance last night.
Don't you suppose it must have been someone impersonating the dead girl?
That, my dear fellow, is a question that can only be answered by calling on her fiancé, Prince Stefano. Let's go over and see him at once, shall we? Prince Stefano, I dislike to intrude upon your personal tragedy, but I must ask you a few questions.
Ask your questions.
Did your fiancée have a sister who may have resembled her?
No. She had no living relatives at all, Mr. Holmes.
Well, tell me this. Who inherits her estate, sir?
Her dresser. A faithful old woman by the name of Martha Greggert, who looked after her for some years.
I see. Did Miss Rayner have an understudy?
As a singer, she could have no understudy. She was irreplaceable.
You say as a singer. Was she also an actress?
Oh, but yes, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, really? How very unusual for an opera singer.
Quiet, Watson, please.
The first time I saw her was in Tosca. She was not another baroness, but her performance was a very promising one, considering her age. In my country, of course, she was not able to appear in anything but opera because she could not speak Russian.
She didn't speak Russian? Now I have the answer.
The answer?
Yes, to what?
To this entire story, from the arrest of your fiancée to certain strange visitations at my hotel last night.
What do you mean, Mr. Holmes?
If you come to my hotel room tonight, my dear Prince, I can safely promise to make the whole matter clear to you. And I dare go a little further. I think that I can even help you to find consolation in your bereavement. Ladies and gentlemen, I can see that you wonder why Dr. Watson and I have asked you to come here to our hotel tonight.
As Minister of Police, I should be stupid if I did not realize that since your other two guests are the Prince Stefano and Martha Gregor, the dead girl's dresser, this meeting has some bearing on the execution of Miss Lily Rayner.
I should prefer to say her murder.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you please, I should like to make my own position in this matter quite clear. 2 nights ago, you, Martha, came to me on behalf of Miss Lily Rayner to solicit my aid. I, convinced that she was guilty, refused that aid. Yesterday morning, she died before a firing squad. Last night, her ghost appeared to me here in this room and asked me to avenge her death.
Her ghost? What nonsense are you talking?
It would be no surprise to me if her poor murdered soul came back from the grave to ask for justice, sir.
I saw her, my good woman, almost as clearly as I see you all now.
I agree with Krasnodar. To talk of ghosts is beyond belief.
Please let me finish. When I had this visitation last night, I decided to investigate the case thoroughly. I did so today, and I can assure you that Miss Rayner paid for a crime she did not commit.
What grounds do you have for saying that, Mr. Holmes?
The letters that were supposedly written to her were in the Grosnian language, and yet today Prince Stefano informed me that she could not appear in the theater here because she did not speak the language.
Those letters were sewed into her bodice, Holmes.
That's true, my dear fellow. And who was the only person who had the opportunity to do that? The same person who came to me 2 nights ago and succeeded in convincing me that Miss Rayner was guilty, her own dresser and supposed friend.
Are you suggesting that
I'm suggesting that you inherited her estate on her death, and that you would have lost that inheritance if she had married and had a family of her own.
What do you have to say in answer to that, Martha?
That I am among madmen. This talk of ghosts proves it.
Very well, then. Let the ghosts support my theories. Hand me the violin, will you, Watson, old fellow?
Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you. And now, turn down the gas light.
Right you are.
That's it. And listen.
Yes. Yes. That's her voice.
And that's her figure standing there in the moonlight, even though she's dead.
Now, what do you say, Mother? Aren't you responsible for her death? If her ghost can sing, I'm sure it can also talk.
I did do it. The letters belong to me. I sacrificed my own baby for gold. May heaven have mercy on my soul.
A confession in front of 4 witnesses. Why not take it away, Krasnodar? We'll testify later.
I will. Come with me, Martha.
I killed my own baby. I deserve to die.
What shall I turn up the gas, Holmes?
Ask Prince Stefano.
No. Do not turn it up. I've seen and heard the ghost of my beloved when the lights were down. I'm not afraid. Please play her melody again, Mr. Holmes.
Aren't you afraid, Prince Stefano?
Why should I be afraid? Lily, my beloved, your spirit I know can be no evil one. I love it as I loved you living. The pleasure of love lasts but an instant. Love's regrets last for a lifetime. This is now my lifetime, brightened by your gracious ghost.
I'm sure this is a very touching scene, but it's getting dreadfully maudlin. All right, Miss Rayner. You may come from behind the tapestry now. Watson, old chap, turn up the gaslight. There's a good fellow.
Right you are, Holmes.
Prince Stefano, permit me to reintroduce you to your far-from ghostly fiancée, Miss Lily Rayner.
Lily, my beloved, you're not dead.
No, I am not dead. Though I cannot see how Sherlock Holmes fathomed my secret.
And there, my dear young lady, you're in exactly the same boat as I am.
Surely the answer is obvious. You gave me the key yourself, Prince Stefano.
I did, but how, Mr. Holmes?
When you informed me that Miss Rayner had once played the title role in Tosca.
Tosca? What's that got to do with anything?
Consider the plot, Watson. A minister of police who is very susceptible to a lady's charms arranges a false execution. Knowing Mr. Krasnodar's weakness, Miss Rayner, you prevailed upon him to do likewise.
Well, then the whole execution was a piece of pantomime. The rifles must have contained blanks.
That's right, old fellow. And what should have heightened my suspicion, Miss Rayner, was the fact that at the moment of your apparent death, Mr. Krasnodar quoted a line from Tosca. He said, "What an artist." I was not perceptive enough at the time to evaluate the remark correctly, I'm afraid. When the simulated execution took place, you were free, but assumed dead.
But why should I indulge in such a trick, Mr. Holmes?
You reasoned that Had you come to me directly, I might easily have turned you over as a fugitive from justice. And when you decided to dramatize the situation and appear last night as an apparent ghost, you knew it would, well, at the very least, stimulate my curiosity. It would cause me to investigate the matter and possibly to learn the truth and clear you from suspicion.
Well, yes, but Holmes, if she's innocent, how about the love letter in English, which was in the handwriting of Josip, the revolutionary leader?
Well, I can see only one explanation for that. You, Prince Stefano, are that mysterious revolutionary Josip.
Stefano! Oh, no, that is not possible.
Mr. Holmes, you are a visitor in my country. I do not suppose you will be staying here much longer.
Stefano, all these months you deceived me.
Silence, Lily. Gentlemen, I hope for your own sake you will not be staying here much longer.
Oh. I've been threatened by far more imposing adversaries than you, Mr. Stefano. I suggest that you leave my room. It's none of my business dabbling in Groznian political affairs. Your secret is safe. In any case, I came to Grozny for a holiday. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. Holmes.
On my soul, Holmes, if we were in London, you wouldn't behave in this offhand way.
But we're in Grozny, old chap, aren't we? Hand me the violin, will you?
All right, here you are.
Thanks. You know, Watson, I've only had professional dealings with two singers in my life. The first was Irene Adler, and she fooled me, oh, so cleverly.
And this singer tried to fool you and failed dismally. Seems to me the score's about even.
No, old chap, no. This one was an amateur. Irene Adler will always be the woman. Well, I think that's enough excitement for one day, don't you? After all, I am supposed to be taking a holiday.
Doctor, that was a swell story. And I'll bet that you were a lot more interested in the beautiful Lily than your story tonight would have us believe.
Well, of course I'm interested in a beautiful woman. But then what man isn't?
Check.
But don't worry about me, Mr. Bartell. You know, being a family man, I just naturally associate a beautiful woman and home. And that makes me think of hospitality.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, according to you, I'm interested in home life. You're primarily interested in wine. Put us together, and we're interested in...
Wine in the home.
Isn't that an important part of hospitality?
That I admit. But remember, my interest in wine is entirely an interest in good wine. In Petri wine, to be exact. Because I know all about Petri wine. I know that the Petri family has been making wine for generations. With the Petri family, the growing of perfect sun-ripened grapes and the art of turning those grapes into fragrant, delicious wine is a heritage. It's a heritage handed down from father to son. The skills of those generations of winemaking are evident in every drop of Petri wine. The name Petri on a bottle of wine is more than a trademark. It's the personal assurance of the Petri family that Petri wine is always good wine. But you'll discover that for yourself. You'll learn that no matter what type wine you prefer, you like it better when it's a Petri wine. Because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes adventure do you have lined up for us next week?
Next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a most unusual story in which Sherlock Holmes crossed swords with a famous Frenchman and proved that although the English have been called a nation of shopkeepers, that a murder did not always prove to be a good bargain.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Sussex Vampire. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro Goldwyn Mayer, and tonight Dr. Watson was played by Mr. Joe Kearns, who substituted for Mr. Nigel Bruce. Mr. Bruce is scheduled to return to the program next week. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family.